You have this incredible character and you can't wait to write about them, but there's one big problem. You don't have an arc. Everybody knows you need an arc or your character's going to be bland and generic, right? In this video, I'll tell you everything you need to know about character arcs, the different types, how to use them, and what that term even means in the first place. Character arc is a relatively simple concept, but it can be more nuanced than a lot of people realize. On the surface level, character arc is about how your character changes throughout the story, but that ends up leading to more questions like how do you choose an arc and how do you execute it in a way that doesn't feel generic and played out? First, you want to ask these questions. Who is your character on the surface? Who are they deeper down? What do they want and what do they need? Your character's want should be influenced by who they are as a person and their backstory, but it should also be pretty surface and superficial. It should be the kind of thing that wouldn't feel vulnerable for them to say in front of people. The need should be what actually fuels the want. It should be more personal and vulnerable, and it should be a reflection of their desire. What is the thing they have to learn or realize, and how do the events of the story change them? Arc has to be gradual, and it has to be a natural outcropping of the story and the choices they've made along the way, the lessons they've learned, and how the plot itself actually influences them. It can be subtle, the character starting to make better choices, having new knowledge or expertise, stepping into the next stage of life. Imagine a fantasy setting. If a hunter takes in a young orphan and starts teaching them how to fend for themselves, at first they're not able to keep up and they're making mistakes all the time. The orphan is unpracticed and struggling. They're missing with the bow. They're burning stuff that they're trying to cook. They're pulling out berries that are poisonous that look very similar to the ones you're supposed to eat. Maybe they cut themselves accidentally while sharpening a dagger, and now the hunter teaches them how to make a salve to smear over the wound to help it heal. Eventually, the orphan starts doing these things the correct way without supervision, and then when the hunter gets old, now it's that orphan that's making the medicines for the hunter in his old age now that he can't keep up anymore. This stuff may seem superficial and surface level, but it is still part of a character arc, especially if this orphan used to be very timid and scared and now they are confident and self-assured. Now is the part where I tell you there's actually 3 types of arcs: positive, negative, and flat. Positive is the one that everybody thinks of immediately when they hear the term character arc. It is where the character is changing for the better and acting in a way that aligns them more with that deep-rooted psychological need. They are resolving issues, both surface level and external, but also internal, and getting closer to what they need to be. A negative arc, on the other hand, is the opposite. Maybe your character gets closer to their want, but as they get closer to their want, they get further from their need. It's misguided, it's not filling that void, and it's actually what is getting them further from what they really require. Now, some changes can still make them better, but in the macro level, they're still going in the wrong direction. Examples of this would be Light from Death Note, Walter White from Breaking Bad, and Tony Soprano from The Sopranos. The third kind of arc is a flat arc. It's not so much about how the character themselves changes, but more about how they change the world around them. Characters with a flat arc tend to be highly competent and highly skilled and very set in their ways. Maybe that's an obstacle for them, but not always. The type of characters you can think about for that would be L from Death Note, Batman, and Goku. Paragons tend to have pretty flat arcs. A lot of the plot and a lot of their arc revolves around how their resolve and their strength in it gets them through the worst. Now, why is it still called an arc then at this point if it's flat? That's because if you're zoomed out going big picture, then it looks flat. But if you zoom in and you get a real close look, it actually is an arc, just not as severe or obvious. And maybe it arcs in both directions. It's like a sine wave, and it can curve back and forth, positive and negative, or it could just go positive and then return to baseline. It can go negative and return to baseline. There is a reasonable amount of flexibility even within a lot of these structures. Something you have to remember is that a character with a flat arc can still change and grow, and they can still have character moments. A good example of this, as mentioned previously, is Batman. He's got a relatively flat curve, but he still does change over time. He takes on wards, they influence him, they make him see things from a slightly different perspective, but not really at the same time. And on multiple occasions, he does try to leave the mantle of the Bat behind. He's just not able to. DC rebooted their universe in 2012 or 2014-ish. Can't remember what year it was exactly, but that's besides the point. It was called the New 52, and in that, Green Lantern tries to give Batman the power ring and let him try it on because he sees how strong Batman's will is and what his resolve is like. So he's kind of curious about, like, how did a guy like you not get one of these? So he gives Batman the ring, and Batman can't get it to work. It won't listen to him, won't do anything he says, and they keep talking. Green Lantern does know who he is in real life at this point, at least in universe real life, and he tells him, hey, like, you've been through a lot. If you want this ring to work for you, you have to put what happened that night behind you. In reference to specifically his parents being murdered in front of him in Crime Alley. Now, Batman starts to put it behind him, and the ring starts to actually make constructs for him and listen to what he tells it to do. But after a couple constructs, he makes one of his parents and he sees them, and everything just falls apart. The constructs, right? The ring just shuts off. And he takes the ring off and he goes, look, I'm just not ready for this yet. That's a huge character moment. He's this brooding guy, doesn't let anybody in, doesn't really show who he is deep down. But in that moment, he did give an honest, hard go at making progress and changing and having an actual positive arc, right? So he starts the positive arc, realizes that for him it's too hard and he can't do it. That's probably a false belief, I would say. That's an example of somebody's preconceived notions holding them back. That's something you might want to put in your stories. That's very realistic. But he hits this hurdle and goes, I just can't do it. Boom, returns to his flat arc, even though he's had some sine wave. So those are the three types of arcs and how to use them. I'd say after this, you've got a pretty good understanding of them, and you'll be able to try to apply it in your writing. But the number one thing is, if you don't go out there and practice, you're going to have all this theoretical knowledge, but you're not going to be able to execute. You got to get out there, you got to write, you got to make your mistakes, you got to fumble, and you got to fix it in the edit. You got to get better and improve. So get out there and make sure you start writing. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you got any questions, leave a comment down below.